Yo, what's up? It's Nik. Today I have a kind of a fun episode. So, a friend of mine, his name is Jay. He works in Australia. He's got a company where he basically helps other e-commerce brands kind of grow and scale. Think almost like not necessarily an agency, but also not necessarily like an investor, and also not just a community, but some sort of a combination of all three. He's got a lot of internal resources, coaches, and just other e-commerce operators that work with the brands that are part of this program. Anyways, he's got about $500 million in annual ad spend across his brands. So they're not small brands, there's thousands of brands in there. And I had him on an episode to just discuss everything he sees, patterns, what's working, what's not working, where he thinks AI is going, where he sees, Meta going, Meta ads. And I thought it was just a fun episode. So we recorded the conversation and we put it up here for you. So enjoy it. Let me know if you have any questions. If you've got any questions for Jay or myself, you can reply here, DM one of us, or figure out a way to get in contact. But enjoy this episode and see you soon. All right, Jay, great to have you here. Welcome to Limited Supply. Thank you for being here and excited to jump into today's episode with you.
Thanks, Nik. I think I've been listening to Limited Supply since the very early days. So fun to actually be on the pod.
That's amazing. Before we dive into a pretty dense agenda here, can you give just a quick background of yourself? You're obviously Jay Wright, but give us the background as if your mom was at a dinner party and bragging to her friends. How would she talk about you?
Oh, my mum would probably embellish a lot, so I'll probably tone it down a little bit. But I had an early career in finance and unfortunately sort of graduated right before the GFC in 2008 with a finance degree. So I had sort of like a 4 or 5 year career, but the luster had kind of come off the finance industry. So I had an opportunity to start a marketing agency with a friend in 2012 and sort of just fell into e-commerce. My first client was one of the biggest shoe companies in Australia, a brand called Hype DC. And we started doing SEO for those guys back in 2012 and, rank them for like Nike joggers and all these kind of like, crazy terms that were getting massive traffic. And we attracted a lot of other e-commerce businesses because we kind of knew it was Magento back then, but we kind of knew how to rank Magento stores. And so I did that for sort of 5 years, sold that agency in 2017. I kind of saw some of the brands we were working with crushing it with Facebook ads. So we were very much positioned as an SEO agency. So sold out of that. And then I did my own brands. So I did took a small interest in a kids book. A-B to Jay-Z was my first e-commerce brand. And 2017 was kind of the heyday of Meta ads. And this was the first time I actually had my own balance sheet, my own ad account that I could run completely autonomously. So we did a $8,000 Kickstarter in June 2017. And December 2017, we did $1.1 million at like 40% net profit, basically just blasting Facebook ads. So that was my first taste of
Do you remember what your, well, first of all, do you remember what that feeling was like when, you hit go and then you just see conversions coming in and you're making money?
It was wild. It's
like
just
a drug.
It got me so addicted to e-commerce. It was probably the worst thing that ever happened because it's just, especially back then when it was like, you were just putting, $3,000 in, getting 30 grand a day back.
Totally.
It was just, I think I went pretty hard and maximized it like as much as I could with the stock that we had. But, you think of where we are now and you think back to those days in like 2016, 2017, 2018, and you're just like, oh, if only we had that performance now, knowing what we know, we would have gone a lot harder.
Totally.
So that was my first product. And then I did another kids book brand called A-B to Jay-Z. Then in COVID, I did a gifting product called Dad Cooler, which is like personalized koozies. So that's still going. We did like 10 or 12 grand yesterday on that product. And my last e-commerce business I did was 2021, which is a bathware, tapware, faucet business called Yabby. And that was probably the most legitimate brand I did. It's kind of doing multiple 8 figures now and has been kind of acquired into a bigger group, which I'm now a shareholder of. So I sort of did 4 of my own brands really quickly. And in the process of going from like agency owner kind of working as a supplier to actually having my own brands, I think I realized that there was a lot of stuff up and downstream of just driving traffic that was really impacting the performance of businesses. And I think when I was sort of getting that scale with meta ads for my own businesses, people that used to work with me or knew me sort of started coming to me and asking for help. And so that was really the genesis of what I mostly do now, which is Ecommerce Equation, which is a coaching, training, consulting business. And really we're helping educate and empower businesses to take growth and marketing in-house and, understand the entire ecosystem of running a physical product business so that they can grow further and faster than sort of they ever imagined possible. And so that's sort of what I've been doing for the last 5 years.
Very cool. Yeah, when we first connected, I like the fact that your program is very tactical. It's very practical. It's not just like coaching in the traditional sense or like the course guru stuff. It's very tactical, and it's like there's real businesses and they're doing real revenue. I think your program does like $500 million in spend, right?
Yeah, we are far and away the largest meta partner in Australia. And I think globally would sort of definitely be in the top 20 in terms of the amount of spend that we are overseeing and sort of consulting over. So yeah, easily going to do $500 million in meta spend this year, which is kind of nuts.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm excited to dive into the $500 million of spend. Anything before we start jumping into? I have a bunch of topics. I want to jump into like agencies versus in-house to start.
Yeah, man. Let's go. Happy to kind of go where your interest takes you.
Okay, cool. So you ran an agency. Now you're basically helping brands bring those services in house or kind of run them internally. How do you look at
Yeah.
the usage of agencies?
Look, there are great agencies out there. So I'm never disparaging of agencies. I think a lot of the best talent for marketing is in agencies, right? The challenge is that there are 2.6 million Shopify stores in the US. And if you take like the very best agencies, if you look at like say Tube Science, right? They're one of the biggest meta partners on the planet. I think they put more than $1 billion through their meta partner account, but they only work with the top 40 brands in the world, right? So if the reality is someone watching this podcast who has an e-commerce store will probably never have the opportunity to work with the likes of Tube Science. And so what we saw in COVID was this huge e-commerce boom. And what followed it was a huge agency boom. In fact, there was actually like business opportunity gurus out there spruiking SMMA, social media marketing agency, as a business model. And the whole idea was like, oh yeah, just figure out how to sign up clients,
Right.
offshore the delivery to the Philippines. And not everyone's like that, but there was a huge glut of agencies, right? So the reality is that there's basically one agency for every 5 brands out there, and they literally can't all be good. So when I talk to brands, the general experience that people have had with an agency is mostly negative, right? And it's not to say there aren't great agencies out there. There are. It's just that if you're a small, mid-sized startup brand and don't have huge budgets to spend on agency retainers, the type of agency and the talent within that agency that you get is usually kind of mediocre and not that much better than if you could just figure it out yourself with a little bit of care and effort. So particularly over the last couple of years, we've seen that most people are actually now shying away from agencies. I do a lot of speaking events, and one of the questions I often ask is like, who's running their own ads or who's with an agency? And when I started, like 80% of people would be with an agency. And now I think it's actually inversed. I think, it's less than a third of people that I interact with are actually even using an agency because they've been burnt or they're so scared of the stories that they've heard. Now, that's obviously not the experience of the top end of the market. I think you can actually accelerate growth a lot when you do get to, buy the best talent and sort of rent it. But for we mostly work with small to mid-sized businesses, sort of like 1 to 10 million in annual turnover, looking to kind of grow into the mid 8 figures or 9 figures. And those guys just don't have great experiences. So what do you do, right? What's the alternative? And I think the thing that people go to an agency for is that they simply do not know what to do, right? These founders are often really smart. They've figured out Shopify, they've figured out Klaviyo. And if they knew what to do, they could probably push the buttons and optimize. If they had some support there as a backstop, they can figure it out. So really, what we've created with Ecommerce Equation is this, third option. The first option is agency. The second option is go it alone or try, hire. And we've created a space where we spend a lot of time and effort unpacking what's working, the strategies you need to know, so you don't need to be across all the changes and the updates, and you can basically just install those systems and run them yourself. So,
Totally.
and so I think that's why we've grown so fast, is because there's been a lot of demand for another option,
Yeah.
essentially.
I mean, I completely agree. I think I always tell founders too, like your first, your first few tens of thousands should just be spent yourself, because if you also don't learn how to do it yourself, then when you do hire an agency and you're trying to hire one faster because you're not sure how to do it, then the things they do you can't really double check or verify. And there's a lot of agencies, to your point, that don't know what they're doing, and when they're getting paid $2,500 a month to manage ads, and they're not you're not their first priority, and it's just a recipe for disaster. Like, I completely agree. I think if you're doing less than 10 mil, you shouldn't work with an agency.
Yeah. And look, in the defense of agencies, what I often find is when the founder actually gets involved and understands what's happening, often the problem actually lies up or downstream of ads. But because they don't know how ads are performing, and they always kind of have the option to blame the agency's performance, they never actually look at the business and realize, wait a minute, like, I'm getting way less revenue per click than the average of the market. Maybe there's something going on with my offer or my conversion environment or my demand planning. Or maybe, if the click-through rate is low, maybe it's not because the agency sucks. Maybe it's because you're creative and your messaging isn't accurate. So I think actually owning the whole chain of an e-commerce business allows people to have far more trust and visibility into what they actually need to work on.
Yeah.
And when there's an intermediary who's controlling the traffic, like, people will always think, I just need a better agency, I just need better performance out of the agency. And theoretically, they're not wrong. Like, if you were getting a 10 ROAS, your whole business probably would work. But that's not the market we're in right now. You kind of need to be able to be efficient and understand where you sit relative to the market. And so I think that's the other thing I find when founders take the marketing on themselves, is they stop this constant cycle of like seeking better and better performance or blaming all their business problems on ads. Because the reality is, not all problems in your business are ad problems. There are problems up and downstream of that.
And ads are usually just a way to reflect on it.
100%.
Like, it just brings it out more. It brings out that no one knows what your product is, or that you're too expensive, or that, when you Google your brand, there's 12 other competitors that have a better video there.
100%.
Yeah.
So it's not just that, sometimes there's suboptimal execution from agencies. It's also that it can sometimes make the whole business a bit more opaque, and mean the founders aren't actually working on the things they should be.
Totally. How do you then, so like, let's say there's a brand doing, they're getting to do like $500,000 a month on Shopify. They're spending on ads. They're adding new creative in on a weekly basis. How do you normally recommend they have that set up internally? Is it like full-time people on the ground? Is it, hire like somebody in Sri Lanka to help with ads, and, a graphic designer in Brazil, and like one ads person, wherever home base is? Or like, how do you normally recommend that?
Yeah, there's no one approach. Like, there's definitely, we had one of our members just sell for a 9-figure exit, and they were kind of doing $4 million months, and they had a team of 8. So there's no one way, and the founder was still like heavily involved in the ads, right? So there's no one approach. But at $500,000 a month business, there would be a fair chunk of our members who are still heavily involved in the ads. So I think the way that we approach it is sort of like, there's 3 meta skills for running an ad account. The first is the actual building piece, like uploading creative, writing copy, setting up ad sets and campaigns. It's like kind of the dog's body work where you're actually just grinding it out. And that's like 70% of time. 20% of time is like optimizing, where you're looking at what was built and trying to get more money to the better performing ads and audiences and campaigns more of the time. It doesn't take as long because it's already built, but you still need to be, analytical and figuring out what's going on. And the top bit is strategy, where you're actually like, what do I do for Black Friday? Like what campaigns, how am I going to get spend? And so we solve for the strategy, which is, the bit that takes a long time to learn, but you don't need to spend a lot of time with it. It's just thinking work. And so what we find is the founder often does all of it so they understand it. But that bottom bit of like building, it's quite simple to teach someone how to build an ad, right? So the founder might start out doing a fair chunk, but then they can get a pretty junior talent either in the business or, their existing social media manager or e-commerce coordinator. And they'll often start to get support sort of with the heavy lift of building ads, building out the ad sets. And so they can still really control and oversee the account, even at, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a day, with support from someone who's pretty junior using our training. So probably the most common setup for like someone at $500,000 a month would be founders still like overseeing the account, optimizing it, and they've got a relatively junior talent who's gone through our training who is supporting them with like the heavy lift of ad building and some of the optimization, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm curious, with all the ad spend going through really like the platform you have, what kind of patterns do you see? What's working? What's not working? What do you recommend brands to start, or what brands do you tell to, pack up shop and go home before they even start?
Yeah. So I think that the benefit of the amount of accounts, the amount of spend that we see isn't in the ability to generalize and say like, this is what is working as a whole. The real benefit is understanding the nuance of how different businesses need to respond to their unique circumstances, because we have so much data and so much modeling that we can actually see what variables matter. So let me just give you a real practical example of that. We just rolled out our entire Black Friday sale training IP to the community. And what I see a lot of online is like these generalizations like, oh, for Black Friday, you need to, do this, like do this bid type or run this particular strategy. The challenge is that even though we all sell physical products, a lot of us have very different characteristics of our business. So we actually roll out 3 separate strategies, and we actually know how to define which strategy you should run so you have more accuracy. And if you run the wrong strategy for the wrong behavior of your business, it actually could be a complete flop. So if anyone's ever had the experience of like following someone's advice online who's like probably got a massive 9-figure business, but it didn't work for you, it's probably because you have different characteristics. So for Black Friday, coming back to that example, we find that the variable that matters a lot is who actually shows up on the sale and who buys. And we kind of characterize sales as either being low repeat. So if less than 20% of customers that buy from you when you launch your sale have purchased from you before, we call that a low repeat style of sale. On the flip side, of more than 40% of people, 40, 50, 60, 70% of people who buy when you launch a sale have already purchased from you, that's a high repeat style of sale. And the middle is like a hybrid. Mm-hmm. So if you think about a low or a high repeat style of sale, the type of people who are shopping, the creative they need to see, how you market it, when you launch, basically everything is different. And so for me to go and say like, hey, this is the Black Friday strategy for 4,000 brands, it's incorrect. It's actually, what that much spend gives us is visibility on the nuances that matter, the variables that people can be aware of, so that they can actually get a lot more accuracy with what they're doing. And they're not having to take like snippets of information without the full context and apply it to themselves. So I think it's almost not the general, like, this is what's working. It's almost the nuance of understanding it so deeply from so much data that can help people figure out what they uniquely need.
Yeah. Is there a category that you have that, maybe there's like a ton of, less than 10 SKU supplement brands or personal care brands where, it makes up a large majority or a hefty percentage. And I'm curious for what those brands are, like how you would set up or approach Black Friday now that we're talking about it.
I mean, we currently work with 4,000 brands. So we have every category imaginable, right? So typically if you've got a consumable product like supplements or, any, food, consumables, makeup, like typically the higher repeat styles of sales, right? So what that means is that when you launch the sale, most people that show up to buy from you are existing customers, right? So what you would want to do in those instances is you'd probably want to try and create a crescendo. So when you're launching the sale, you're trying to create this massive spike. So typically, in Black Friday, we're running sales, out before the actual Black Friday weekend. And if you had like a high repeat style of sale, our brands last year over Black Friday, the sale period of Black Friday, the average revenue was 8 weeks of business as usual revenue, which is way more than the market average. So they're doing 2 months of revenue over the week or 10 days of Black Friday sale. And 50% of that, if you are a high repeat style of sale, should be on the first day. So you're almost doing a month's worth of revenue on day one if you're high repeat. If you're low repeat, it's completely different, right? But to do a month's worth of revenue in one day, it's really hard to push that much advertising in a single day. So the strategy for those guys essentially is to market in advance of the sale launching with a hype period. And typically it'd be trying to figure out, and we've got calculators for all of this, right? Like how much money do you need to spend day by day in advance? How long do you need to hype for? And what are the strategies that you're going to do to make that really, frankly, quite a small subset of people hyper aware of the sale and like in a frenzy with massive FOMO ready to go.
Right.
Because there's no point advertising to the entire country if you know that 70% of your sales on the first day are going to come from, your 100,000 existing purchases, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the strategy is like vastly different for that style of business, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, I always find I call it filling and flushing the toilet, like, getting everybody in there and then flushing it all.
100%. But then if you sell canoes, right, for example, and it's like a once and done product, and you hear us talking about hyping the sale, like it's not going to work because you actually need to go and like capture demand and build demand during the sale period with a great offer.
Yeah.
And so you would probably not push as hard into day one. You might only do, 15 or 16% of your revenue on the first day. So you don't want to overspend on hype in advance because you could blow out the profit. And I guess that's the point I'm trying to make about not generalizing, but actually understanding the nuance deeply and understanding what variables matter for people.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, like what do how do founders best learn the strategic piece of, because really it's like growth marketing is kind of the puzzle piece that they have to learn here, right? Everything from the messaging and who they're targeting to the offer to the merchandising of what's in there, and does it feed a household, and all of that kind of stuff. Like how have you best found osmosis, I guess, to founders there?
Yeah, well, we have 3 elements, right? So we've got curriculum. So we spend a crazy amount of time and money and resource. We have an entire curriculum department looking at how do we actually leverage the data that we've got access to find patterns in what's working, codify it in super simple ways, and then disseminate that through the community, right? So curriculum is the first piece. So just to give you an example, every month we troll through all of this ad spend and all of the ad accounts, and we'll filter for like heavily top of funnel ads. We'll find the best performance relative to the rest of the account across literally thousands of accounts, and then we'll find common themes, right? So literally every 28 days, you're getting like this presidential briefing of like, here are all the best ads, why they work, a breakdown, scripts and GPTs to go create your own scripts. So like the strategy piece is often informed by what's working in the market, and Ecommerce Equation basically goes and figures that out for people and disseminates it. So you don't have to sit there thinking, what kind of content do I need to create for my ads? You're like, all right, here are 6 proven bangers from like $50 million in spend. I'm just going to start there. And then at least you're not just throwing stuff at the wall waiting for it to stick. So that's an example of sort of curriculum where we're actually out there in the market figuring out what's working. Then we have coaching. So we do like thousands of one-on-one sessions every day. We've probably got 12 to 20 hours of like office hour kind of sessions where you can jump in and see what's working. So we've obviously got the curriculum of like, this is how you set up ads, but then you can come and talk to like a veteran media buyer and say, how should I apply this to me, or what are you seeing? So over time, that osmosis,
almost like office hours.
Got 100%, right? So you've got so you can actually work with someone to actually see how they think, and you pick that up not just from courses, because we all know no one does a course, right? It's
Right.
like
Yeah, it's very visual. Like for me, I'm very visual. If I can't see somebody do it in the UI, I just believe it's all fake.
100%. And then the third element is community. So we spend a lot on community, but what we see is these just like ripples of like one percenters. So right now there's like a pop-up app that's just like spread through our community like wildfire. People's conversion rates are going from like 5% to like 15 to 20% opt-in.
Wow.
And so like everyone is just on that way before the rest of the market, right? So
Right.
you just got this competitive edge because we're all in a collective kind of saying, let's share what's working, let's
Totally.
share our ad spend so we can all like look at what's working collectively. And so you've got like, yeah, coaching, curriculum, and community. And really, that means that like no individual brand, no matter how big or how many resources they have, could ever be better at strategy than all of us collectively kind of working together.
Yeah, I started media buying in 2017, like at heavy scale, and there was that one guy, John Loomer, on who
Oh
has a
yeah, I
bunch of
remember John
content.
Loomer.
Dude, he has
Yeah,
phenomenal content for well, at least it was 8 years ago, but
yeah,
he so like there was his content and then there was really nothing else. And I always, like I had joined a company and had never done performance marketing before, but bullshitted that I did. And I went from spending like 60 grand a month to 2 million a month, and
wow,
basically just learned it by networking and like having a network, and specifically like a really good group chat. And I've always thought that that is like one of the biggest keys that a lot of people don't talk about, is that social aspect, or like that just knowing that you've got a couple people in your pocket who are really smart that you can lean on for help. And kind of like what you're saying with the community piece, like just having, sounds like there's probably, well, there's a big community, but then there's also probably lots of micro communities or group chats within that are just doing exactly this.
100%. Yeah, there's obviously we've got multiple programs for different stages and phases of business. But yeah, 100%. Like and people find their own little tribe within the community,
Yeah,
and then we've got the broader kind of like eye over the whole the whole market.
totally. I I feel like I feel like a lot of e-commerce too is like heavily related to mindset, because so much of it is like when you don't know what you're not doing right, you just think you're doing it wrong. And
Yeah,
but once you start to figure out from other people the patterns of what's working, what's not working, or why something's not working, it for a lot of people it turns around right there.
I think so, and I think it's also just like you can show people the skills, and they probably have the character traits because we work with brands that are semi-established already. But there's this other piece which is belief. And when you're in a room or you're in like a semi-private coaching session with like coach and a few other brands, and you're looking at someone else and they're spending $30,000 a day, it just kind of like breaks your belief system of what's possible. So you might be at 2 or 3 grand, and you're looking at some founder whose product is like not that much better than
Right.
yours, and they don't seem like they're crazy smart, and you're
Yeah.
like, what the hell? So a lot of it is just the belief piece of being in a room and seeing other people doing it, and you go from thinking like a theoretical, I understand that theoretically that can happen, but when you actually have these real life people and you're seeing them do it real time, it goes from being like a maybe one day to like a I'm going to get there. And I think that belief piece from the community environment is huge as well.
Yeah, I like that. As far as like AI goes, are you seeing AI infiltrate a lot of these brands at a smaller stage, or like where are you seeing AI get involved? Obviously, there's ChatGPT and maybe like using it to analyze stuff, but I'm curious how you're seeing AI making its way in.
Yeah, so I think when you say AI, everyone immediately thinks of like ChatGPT. They think of like generative AI, like UGC creators that are generated with AI. And I think human nature is to focus on the new and the novel, right? So AI is all this generative text, generative AI, all these new and novel features. But I think something that is very distinct with this tech cycle over previous tech cycles is that we have the Magnificent Seven, right? So when the dot-com boom happened, it was a complete standing start, right? There was no tech businesses; they all came out of nothing. When mobile launched, 10 years later, there was like some incumbents, but it was a new hardware wave. And there was, again, sort of a bit of a bit of a standing start. But what we have now is we have like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Amazon with like hundreds of billions of dollars on their balance sheet. And what I think is going to be very different is that you can see from Meta offering people $1 billion to come work for them for 4 years, that like these major tech players, they are aggressively going to build, buy, or capture the major use cases and the major value uplift that happens from them.
Totally.
So I think that from an AI perspective, there are huge advancements happening within Facebook. And I think because it's new, it's not new, it's not novel, right? It's the same interface that you're opening up in Ads Manager. It doesn't feel like there's been a huge revolution. But the reality is, over the last 2 years, is that Meta has stripped out every single one of its Intel CPU chips, and they've completely replaced them with NVIDIA H100 chips and their own silicon. And on top of it, they've basically rolled out an entire new algorithm, right? You've got like Meta Lattice, which is connecting all their inventory with AI. They've got crazy updated sequencing. There's Andromeda. There's like, they've basically rebuilt the whole thing. And it's so in my opinion, most people are probably too focused on the new and novel stuff, and they're not actually going back to the core platforms and actually figuring out, well, how do I win in an AI world for the primary platforms? Because the way the algorithm works, the way people consume social media even has completely changed. Like 2 years ago, it was a social graph. We would see content from people in our feed that we'd connected with. Now, like 70% of time on Meta platforms is in Reels. It's an interest graph. It's an algorithm serving up that content. So your content needs to have evolved. The way that it's actually figuring out who to show your ads to is not based on interest targeting. It's based on interpreting what that actual creative is. And so I think we're really focused on helping people win at Meta ads and Google, with their new AI algorithms. And I think there's a lot of other fringe use cases. But for most of the members that I work with, if I was to say, hey, do you want a virtual assistant who can help with copywriting, help you with support tickets, help you with basic data analytics, or do you want like 30% better ad performance? Everyone would say, give me the better ad performance, right? So like that's where I'm really focused, is like really empowering brands to understand the shifts that have just happened and how they can be like at the front foot of those advancements with the major players. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking a lot about AI. There's definitely some stuff like, so there's two ways that AI is going to help e-commerce businesses. The first is improved performance from marketing platforms. We're like seeing that. The other is just there's going to be an expansion of revenue per employee. And there's a bunch of use cases that we're seeing already. Obviously, like design times are down, copywriting times are down. We've seen people go from customer support teams of 10 to 4 using tools like Sienna. So like there are those use cases, but I think the major use case right now that probably most people are sleeping on is just understanding how fundamentally ads has changed and knowing what to do with that.
Yeah. I've always thought, ever since 2017, I always pretend or tell people that like the ads manager is like a person. Like when it's upset, when it's got a yellow flag, like you got to fix that, when you got to feed it more information, because the more you feed it, the smarter it gets. You just got to really think of it as a person.
Yeah.
And now it's more than ever, because, if, and to your point too, if the content doesn't also do that, like if your content doesn't feed the ads engine and basically tell it from the content who to go to and what you're offering, you're pretty screwed nowadays.
Oh, it's like, it's flipped. We used to be able to like get people these step changes in their business just from media buying, like how to actually structure the account for incrementality with exclusions and true top of funnel, and, how to actually like find good interests and targeting and, all that kind of stuff. And now you're not getting step changes from that stuff. It's just like,
anymore.
No, now it's just like, if you actually nail the creative, that's where the step changes are happening. You need to be good at media buying and not do stupid stuff in the account.
Mm-hmm.
But there's almost like is it best practice or not? And then a lot of the big step changes for businesses we're seeing are around like messaging, avatar work, and how they're reflecting that in their actual creative as the main inputs into social.
Totally. And you're now bringing this over to the US, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, Australia is small, so we've always been in the US because 60% of the brands that we work with sell into the US.
Right.
So, but we're now kind of boots on the ground in in the States, and kind of building our community over there as well.
Amazing. And yeah, I mean, there's such a big appetite here for events like e-commerce events, whether they're massive conferences, or they're like small get-togethers and brunches and whatnot. So I think that's going to resonate extremely well.
Yeah, 100%. I'm actually there. I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but we're there in September doing a series of events on the Meta AI reset.
Oh,
Did that
actually,
in June as well.
yeah. Where can people find info for that? Because that is, I think, pretty interesting for a lot of people.
Yeah, so check us out on Instagram, and we'll have a link up there on our page when we're sort of live at those events, or just shoot me a DM and I can get you the details.
Sweet. Jay, I'm curious,
Yep.
before we get to the end here, what are some final thoughts or parting words you'd give to an upcoming e-commerce entrepreneur founder who's, in the mud, getting through it, doesn't have a lot of budget to spend, but, looking to get to the other side?
The number one bit of advice I have is that you can work on so many things, right? And if you get the same feed that I get, there's no shortage of people shouting at you to do SEO or conversion optimization or Pinterest or Snapchat or TikTok. And e-commerce businesses don't grow by ticking everything off a list, right? It's not like you just tick all the things that you meant to do off and you get to the bottom of it and there's growth. The reality is that there was one thing on that list that was the most impactful thing that was holding your business back. And when you solve that, the business expands to the next bottleneck. And so the more that you can get clarity on what you actually need to work on, like what is the true constraint of the business, and the more you can focus your effort and energy on that, the more your business will grow and the less daunting and overwhelming it feels. So when when we give brands clarity by showing them numbers and benchmarking to others and showing them where we believe the bottleneck is, there's a huge amount of confidence that comes with that to execute in that direction. And really, I think that's where growth lives. It's the intersection of clarity into what you need to work on and confidence that that will lead to the result you want, and how to actually execute on it.
Yeah,
So, seeking that clarity, like you said, either through finding your peers and getting a group chat and getting benchmarking, or, like a service like Ecommerce Equation that sort of is built to do that, I think is just such a relief for so many people. And, and if you're established and you kind of got a product in market, there's a path forward. Like, even if it feels like you're stuck, it's just finding out what you actually need to work on in the right order.
totally. Yeah, I love that. I think I couldn't agree more. I think so many people get like the shiny object syndrome, and there's really there's so many case studies where somebody just it's literally one guy in his underwear focused on one channel and built
Yeah,
a business doing 50 million a year.
100%.
Yeah,
100%. It doesn't need to be super complicated, to be honest.
totally. Amazing. Well, Jay, where can people find you, learn more, hit you up for questions or learn more about the program, the community, etc.?
Yeah, I'm probably most prolific on Instagram, Jay Wright Official. Or if you want to learn about Ecommerce Equation, it's ecommerceequation.com.au. And shoot me a DM. Always happy to have a chat.
Amazing. Thank you for coming on, Jay.
I'm stoked to be on here. Thank you, Nik. Appreciate you.